I'm excited to be here and really glad that you were able to join us. This is Gary Newton. I didn't do an appropriate introduction, but Gary Newton of Arkansas Learns. And Gary, I want to have you on to talk about a whole host of things because as far as I'm concerned, you are the resident expert on all things education, school boards, teachers union, you name it. But just to kick us off, tell folks if they're not familiar with Arkansas Learns, not to be confused with the Learns Act, tell us a little bit about your organization and what y'all do.
Yes, thank you. Like Opportunity Arkansas was asked to do this about 12, 13 years ago. And it was the result of being a dad with kids in public school and seeing a system that was not working for parents or students. And at the time, I was the number 2 guy at the Little Rock Regional Chamber. We looked at it as a fundamental economic development issue that unless you have quality education options, you are dying as a community. And Little Rock has a tortured past with education. It's also the richest local government in all of Arkansas, and yet couldn't seem to get its act together. So the advocacy of as a parent was noticed, and I was asked to create what we called Arkansas Learns. So I had the common experience with you of starting an organization from scratch, but something that we're both very passionate about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so what are some 12, 13 years ago? So 2010,
2012.
2012, okay.
Yeah.
Bad at math, obviously. What are some of the things that y'all have really focused on in the last few years? I know you do some work at the legislature and with the public, but what are some of your passion projects in the education system?
Well, the oversimplification, we do everything based on the core principles of student focus, transparency, accountability, rewards, and choice. And so we feel like that over the decade, and even my predecessors before, this goes back to Act 35, early part of this century, we feel like we laid the groundwork for what Learns took us to the promised land. So we were very involved early on with the creation of open enrollment public charters in Arkansas, with interdistrict school choice, with resolving ancient federal desegregation orders that allowed, in an Orwellian way, districts to actually segregate under the name of desegregation because they were keeping those of color out of having choice in their respective districts. The A through F grading system for schools so that parents and employers and taxpayers would understand how their public schools are performing. I would look to the abolition of collective bargaining for not only public school employees, but state employees, college and university employees. The right to quit the union, which when we inherited a system that in Little Rock you could only quit during a 2-week window, or you could risk another year of payroll deduction. I think in the union at large it was a month window, but it wasn't much better.
Well, now, Gary, I have to correct you because I have been informed on very good authority that there actually is no teachers union in the state of Arkansas.
Well, it's funny. There's still a lot of people paying those $700 plus dues, so maybe they should give themselves a raise. If the teachers union doesn't exist, then why do you need to be paying dues?
Yeah. Well, if the teachers union doesn't exist, why do they call themselves the teachers union?
Well, and there's a lovely building on the Capitol grounds that if they're ready to give that up, I'm sure we could find a charter school that would love to go in there.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe we could take it. We could split it. Well, I'll take the top floor. You can take the bottom.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to be sure, we haven't had time in the show yet to really dig into this, but I think this is a great way to launch into this topic, and we're going to be talking about it a lot more over the next couple of hours. There's something out there, Gary, called the Educational Rights Amendment of 2024. And I'll be honest, that sounds pretty good. I mean, I like education rights. I think a lot of people listening and folks across Arkansas love educational rights, right? I mean, that's a big deal. But what is this all about? Because there's a lot of information floating out there, and I know your organization has been covering this. We've certainly been talking about it a lot. High level, let's just start there, a 30,000-foot view. What is this thing? Because I'm not sure that educational rights really paints a complete picture.
Well, I mentioned Orwell before, or at least the adjective Orwellian. It is that Arkansas finally, after Learns, is living up to the full meaning of Article 14 in our Constitution. It's not only a free and efficient system of public schools, it's and all opportunities that are available for education. So finally, with Learns, we're getting to the point where parents have ultimate control of where they choose to educate their students. And then comes along, not only when the legislature passed it, as you recall, there was an effort to actually do away with that law through initiation.
Yep.
And these are some of the same folks. It's not all the same folks because there was a little split in the camp over there about who was going to support a constitutional amendment or not. And so now they are engaged, and unfortunately the title is extremely misleading. We finally have, Arkansans have hard-won educational rights for perhaps the first time in our history. But this group comes along with the Educational Rights Amendment of 2024. It sounds lovely. It is chiefly sponsored by the aforementioned, evidently non-existent Arkansas Education Association, which also happens to be an affiliate of the National Education Association, one of those radical leftist groups in America, the group that was responsible for shutting down schools during COVID and keeping them shut, the group responsible for advocating. I'm sorry, I was going to ascribe something to them that actually belongs to the National School Boards Association. So I get my unions confused.
Easy to do.
Yes.
Easy to do.
But it is a group that is leading this effort. What I would say is, other than the Little Rock School District, the Arkansas Education Association is largely ineffective. But citizens of Arkansas need to look at what that group stands for and what they did to the Little Rock School District when they were in control for decades and ask themselves, do they want their union-dominated central government control over education to be what happens in their respective districts?
Well, and that's that is such a foundational point of all of this that, they've come along this new coat of paint. As you mentioned, a lot of the same folks from last summer that failed to take down the Learns Act last summer. Now they're back. They've rebranded. They've got this cute little, school bus logo and all of this stuff. But these are the same groups. These are the same, people, generally speaking, that have been in charge of the education system in Arkansas for decades. And look where it's gotten us. And, I always reference this idea or this quote, the definition from Einstein of the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And here they come, running through the gates as if they're here to save us all from education freedom and all these horrible things like letting parents choose where their kids should go to school. And they act like they've got something new to offer. But it's just the same old junk that they've been peddling for decades.
It's the more money, more time crowd. If we just had more money and just had more time, we could fix this. Money fell out of the sky during COVID. If money could solve what ails Arkansas education, it would have. We just had a report of the legislature that over $7 billion in state, federal, local dollars were spent on Arkansas K through 12 education, and yet we're at 39% reading readiness. This group and those like them were in control of Arkansas education for so long. They had perpetual boogeymen. It would be, first it was the private schools. It was going to destroy public education. Then it was the open enrollment public charter schools. Then it was interdistrict school choice. Then it was the Succeed Scholarship. And then it was the philanthropic investment in kids. And now it's Learns. And it's simply the latest thing that they say is going to destroy education. And yet, it is when the poor and the middle class finally got choice that this monopoly lost their collective minds. So really what it is people leaving this governmental monopoly and looking at all of the above, not just one choice, but all options, all of the robust options we have in Arkansas. And finally, we're at that point, and here come the petitioners and the plaintiffs. They have filed suit in Pulaski County Circuit Court to attack LEARNs. They can't get their story straight.
Gary, just 90 seconds. We're talking, very high level about the Education Rights Amendment. What's your 90-second pitch on what people really need to know? Because there's a lot of noise, what the other side is saying, and we're going to keep unpacking this as we go. But for folks who might just be listening right now, what do they need to know about the Educational Rights Amendment?
It is a progressive wish list with a blank check. It takes the power out of the hands of our elected representatives. We choose to govern ourselves as a representative republic. Our elected representatives would have their hands tied in determining what their vague, very general descriptions are in the measure. The most insidious part of it is it prohibits the legislature from doing anything about it, but requires them to fund it and implement it. And because they offer assistance to any student within 200% of the poverty line, which is, by the way, $64,200 for a family of four, assistance could mean anything. And we know it's going to mean whatever the courts decide it means. And it means that also, just like in Little Rock with the desegregation cases, that the state will be mandated to fund it whatever the courts say it is.
All right. Well, that says it better than I could say it, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk more because there's even more to unpack there. But you're right on point. I mean, this is a wish list. This is a laundry list of union wish list items with no funding mechanism, no pay for, no cost estimate. It's just a blank check. Pass it so we can find out what's in it, Nancy Pelosi style. And folks, you're going to be paying for it if this becomes law. Gary, we got a text here. I want to get your thoughts. A listener says, the LEARNS Act, let me tell you how the LEARNS Act has affected my family. Because of the LEARNS Act, my wife, with 17 years of teaching in public schools, only makes $6,000 more than a first-year teacher. You've got a lot of teachers bitter about this mess. Gary, what are your thoughts?
Several. First of all, his wife likely got a $2,000 raise last year, probably the highest that has ever happened, because all teachers, if they were at $50,000 or above, got at least a $2,000 raise. We can't help that Arkansas was at the bottom of the bottom when it came to starting teacher salaries. Are we to wait to increase them from $36,000 to $50,000? No, we're going to be bold. Arkansas has only ever set minimum salaries. Just because we set a new floor doesn't mean that every school district in Arkansas doesn't have the ability to then fund veteran teachers as they will. I would point people to the parable of the vineyard, that it's only when you start comparing yourself with others that you become dissatisfied. How about take it in isolation? Be appreciative of the fact that a $2,000 raise is good instead of comparing yourself to those that are just starting out. I know teachers that have taught in some districts for 28 years, the maximum, and would never have achieved $50,000 a year under that plan.
We're having a lot of fun. More fun than a human being should be allowed to have, as our old friend Russ used to say. We're talking with Gary Newton of Arkansas LEARNS, and we're talking about all sorts of things, everything education related. But Gary, I want to circle back because we got just a limited amount of time the rest of the hour here. Education Rights Amendment. You talked about it being a union wish list and a blank check into the state constitution. I want to drill down into that just a little bit more. What does that look like? And when we talk about school choice and education freedom and all the progress that's been made that your group and others have been working towards for so long, what would this mean if this becomes part of the state constitution? What's it going to mean for education freedom? What's it going to mean for taxpayers? What's it going to mean for our policymakers going forward that are working to represent us in the state capitol? You talked about how, their hands are going to be tied. Just break this down for us a little bit more.
It embeds sameness into our Constitution. Choice ceases to be choice when all choices are the same. And in this instance, they want the central government control to extend to all aspects of education, and they want to do that by making sure that anybody who uses an education freedom account has the sameness applied to whatever group is educating that child, whether it's homeschool, micro school, private school, independent school. Those of means have always had and will always have access to unfettered choice. They will choose options that are not restricted by the government or controlled by the government. That means that this group wants to cut off that opportunity to the poor and middle class to have the same type of access. Maybe not the full tuition amount, but at least it helps. It's a little bit that helps on that journey to get a student the help that he or she needs. But this group wants to make sure that choice ceases to be choice, because we're going to make sure that everything behaves in the same way. And there's a reason that private, independent homeschools are now 60,000 students in Arkansas. Think of this. Private and homeschool students have saved the Arkansas taxpayers billions of dollars by educating their children. Under the Lakeview decision, the state has to come up with a per-pupil amount, and then the legislature is forced to fund it. If all of those parents, which is their right, registered for their respective school districts tomorrow, kind of the opposite of a strike, it would bankrupt the state. We have to understand this is just honoring their respective choices with a minimal amount of foundation funding to get the education that they need.
So you said something, you said a lot of really important things in there, but at the very beginning you said something really important, that this would be put into the state constitution. And I want to be sure people listening really understand that, because this is not, look, we have initiated acts in Arkansas, right? So someone can go out, get signatures, put a law on the ballot, right? And then the legislature can tweak it if they need to. The voters can more easily tweak it in the future, right? There's things that can be changed going forward if something's put into state law. But the significance of this being put into the state constitution, and it's going to do all of these big things, right? It's going to create 5 minimum new massive welfare programs. It's going to end education freedom, as you said. We have no idea how much it's going to cost. It's going to, reintroduce Arkansas schools to indoctrination, all of these things. And that's all boiled down. You hear all that and you would think, well, it must be really specific, right? Like, it must be really detailed what's in this proposal. It's 5 pieces of paper. It is very short and very light on detail, and yet the breadth of it and how far-reaching it is, we don't even know that the people pushing it don't even know.
They don't, and they admit that. They say, we don't know how much it'll cost. But then they refute when we actually start trying to quantify it and look and see what are we currently spending on, for example, early childhood, pre-K in Arkansas. And let's take that number that we're currently funding and divide that by the number of students that are currently in pre-K. I mentioned the more money, more time crowd. Early childhood is the third leg of the stool when the left wants to do something in education. They believe that is the silver bullet to fix everything. We're big believers in early childhood education if it's quality. And in this case, Arkansas, for the first time, has ranked number 1 in an education category in early childhood education by Wallet Hub. And that says, based on 3 metrics, access, funding and resources, and quality. We're ranked number 1. 5 months after the enactment of LEARNS, we're number 1 in an education category. The other number 1 where we are is on starting teacher salaries as factoring cost of living. We're number 5 if you don't factor that, but we like that number 1 when you do factor.
Yeah, absolutely. So the status of this right now is folks are out, the teachers union, some of their allies, ballot question committee that they set up, they're out getting signatures. They're trying to get registered voters to sign this thing. The deadline is July 5th, so it's coming up pretty quickly. I think it's actually 2 weeks from tomorrow. And we'll see where they end up. I think based on their own numbers, it seems like they're struggling, to say the least. But the impact of this, I think, cannot be understated. And actually, according to them, it can't be stated at all. I mean, to your point, Gary, they said in legislative committee this week, we'll play the audio in the next hour. Well, we don't know. We don't know how much it's going to cost. But what we do know for sure is that the returns will be 9-1, and that the estimates coming out from the other side, which are from us, are propaganda. It's propaganda.
Exactly.
And that's all they have.
They've lost their mind. When you hear that phrase, our democracy, don't be shamed.
Direct democracy.
Direct democracy is tyranny in many ways. Yeah. But the people rule in Arkansas, and this is part of the process, the signature gathering process. They hate everything that has to do with opposing people signing on this bill. We're not stopping people from signing it. We're trying to inform people. Our argument is read what they say. We believe you will decline to sign once you read it. Don't go by the touchy-feely title, and don't be shamed into signing something to get this Trojan horse. It's the union's Trojan horse into the Arkansas Constitution to then have a government takeover of all things education right at this pivotal moment in history when we're finally getting the educational opportunities available to all Arkansans.
Well, and the longer this goes on, you see on social media and obviously their town hall meetings, their clown show, frankly. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to call it, at the legislature the other day, just screaming into the microphones and pounding their fists about this. They're getting more and more desperate. They're getting more and more scared. And that's fine. Look, this is part of the process, right?
Process.
But the thing that just frustrates me so much, they're coming at us. They're coming at the other side, right? You're lying. They are handing these petitions to people outside of liquor stores and grocery stores and public libraries and anywhere else that they can go, that they can find people, and they're sticking a piece of paper in your face and they're saying, sign this. It's for fairness. Sign this. It's for equal standards. Sign this. It's going to make our education system better. And to your point, we just want people to have the facts. We just want people to know. And if you want to sign it, if you think that ending education freedom and creating massive new welfare programs and putting all these new restrictions on private schools that are going to violate their religious liberty and setting us back 20, 30, 50 years in education, if you think that's the right thing to do and that's what you want, by all means, sign the petition. But don't fall for it when you're just being told it's for fairness.
Exactly.
It's for standards.
It's the same group that was lamenting the tax cuts this week. They were actually apoplectic about the tax cuts because they believe all taxpayer dollars are theirs.
That's right. And they think they can spend it better than Arkansans can.
Well, and the reality is we're a balanced budget state. So there's really essentially only two ways to raise governmental funds. It's to raise taxes, be it property, income, or sales. There are others, but mainly that. Or take money, funding away from other initiatives and programs. So if we're forced to fund this progressive wish list, Arkansans are not going to like either having their taxes raised or taking money away from public safety, health care, or even teacher salaries.
We're talking a lot about the Educational Rights Amendment, quote unquote. Y'all can't see my air quotes, but I'm doing it. And things that feel good and sound good. So there's something else that sounds good that's been in the newspaper a little bit lately, and I don't know that there's anyone who knows more about it than Gary Newton, and it's called Solution Tree. Tell folks a little bit about Solution Tree.
Well, there are plenty of folks that know far more about it than I, but I have been interested in this. There were two things that really prompted. Solution Tree is a professional development education organization. I won't go much more into it than that, but in 2017, there was a no-bid $4 million contract with this organization. We have since, once questions were raised at Legislative Audit Executive Committee, it has been discovered that over $143 million has been spent by Arkansas taxpayers since that $4 million no-bid contract, including that, rather. So as Senator Linda Chesterfield aptly described, these are tentacles into school districts, education service cooperatives, colleges and universities, and the Department of Education, and the Arkansas Association of Educational Administrators, who got a $5 million grant from the ADE to pay its members to moonlight as Solution Tree practitioners, and, oh, by the way, funnel $3 million directly to Solution Tree. So that is one of our competitive groups. Arkansas Learns regularly goes up against the Arkansas School Boards Association, which is not run by former school board members but by former administrators, and the Arkansas Association of Educational Administrators. For them to get state funding, even though it was through ESSER funds, but it came through the state, I think that's an uneven playing field in the advocacy world. They're a C6 like we are, and it pointed out some real problems. Then we saw a year ago a full-page ad in the New York Times talking about the Arkansas Miracle by Solution Tree. I don't know who they were trying to appeal to, readers of the New York Times, but it was damning for them because they said things that were absolutely untrue, and they used Arkansas data to say it, or claimed it was Arkansas, easily refutable. So cut to that, thankfully, this administration and this secretary paid enough attention to this to ask some questions. And so the contract was up. There was up for a bid. There were several people in the bidding process. They ultimately got the contract. It was north of $100 million. You could have added up the three runners-up and still hired them all and saved $45 million, and yet this outfit got a perfect technical score and was obviously the lower in price.
So just to unwind that just a little bit, they are a vendor with the state of Arkansas,
Yes.
Correct? Solution Tree.
Based out of Bloomington, Indiana.
And they get $143 million in no-bid contract revenue from the taxpayers.
Well, $4 million no bid from the state.
Okay.
But then the tentacles
then it balloons.
Yes.
To do what?
Well, I'd let them describe it to communicate better, to collaborate better, sit around and talk to each other better. It's touchy-feely and it's anecdotal and it makes adults feel good. But it has not, according to the Office for Education Policy, the University of Arkansas, the trusted source for education data, it has not improved student academic outcomes.
And that would presumably be the point.
That
right?
would be the point. And to the secretary's credit, he made sure that was the point when he spoke before the legislative committee.
All right. Solution Tree, we're going to get into it a little bit. Gary, real quick, before we hit the hard break at the top of the hour, a little bit more on Solution Tree, and then tell folks just where they can find more information about you and the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. No judgment on Solution Tree. It's just we want results. But since the contract was pulled by Solution Tree, they have been in crisis management mode. In fact, they had a friendly interview with KUAF where they said they don't even know what a $66 million contract, they don't have any idea what it's all about. There's no paperwork. Well, we found the paperwork. And it was signed by their president, Ed Ackerman, and then Secretary of Education, Johnny Key. It ultimately wasn't executed, but they don't know what's going on in their own business, or they're not telling the truth. I would ask folks, go to Arkansas Learns on Facebook and or X and see how we're chronicling the disinformation, if you will.
I love it. Gary, you are, I want to say a great American, but you're a great Arkansan, even more than that.
I'll take
and
both.
I just really you can have both. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for being here. Go to Arkansas Learns Facebook page. He puts out a ton of great information.